Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together in Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Beis, the second line from the top. The Gemara brings a discussion in regards to the status of liquids that come out from grapes that are tamei. In the discussion, the Gemara will bring a brayso that had quoted a daf and a half before in Daf Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, Yosiv Rav Acha bar Rav Avyo kamed Rav Chizda. Rav Acha bar Rav Avyo was sitting before Rav Chizda. V'Yosiv v'Oma mishmed Rabbi Yochanan. He sat down and he said over in the name of Rabbi Yochanan the following halacha: Anovim shenitmeu dorchin pochos mikabetza v'yenan kosher l'nesochin. Grapes that have become tamei, when one presses them a little at a time, so that they are less than a kabetza that comes out from these grapes. The grapes are less than a kabetza that is producing this juice, this grape juice. Then it will be then viable and valid to be used for yayin nesochin. In other words, even though the grapes themselves are tamei, they do not render the juice that is exuded from those grapes to become tamei. Obviously, we see from here that Rav Achar bar Avya, in the name of Yochanan, is saying that the liquid that are in the grapes are pockets within the grapes themselves, meaning to say they're deposits within the grapes and independent from the grape. So therefore, even though the grape itself is tamei, but the liquid that is in these pockets, since they are independent from the grapes, do not become tamei. Le'emaz kamitma. When do they become tamei? Lechisachit lehu. When they are extracted, but while they're still in the grapes, not. So why over here do we say that the juices that exude from them are still going to be permissible for yayin nesachim? They do not become tamei. Because when they are extracted from these grapes, it's less than the shiur. The shiur for a food, a meichel, to mitame, has to be a kebetza. And therefore, since it's pachos mekebetza, then is not going to mitame the ensuing mashkin that comes out of the grapes. Ihochi asked the Gemara, Kebetza nami, why do you limit to pachos mikabetza? Even a kabetza, since the kabetza itself has a precise measurement, when you then have any amount that is extracted, even the first drop of liquid, it now renders it less than a kabetza. So therefore that should also thereby be permitted. Why does he say a statement of dorchim pachos mikabetza? Why not just say dorchim mikabetza? The Hasnan will prove that indeed, when it's a full kabetza, it also would be valid for not being metame the grape juice that comes out of it. This nan tamei meis sheselchat zeisim va'anovim. Somebody who's tamei meis, he came in contact with a mace, a dead body, so he himself is an av hatuma, whereby when he then comes in contact with the olives or the grapes, he renders them into a rishon l'tuma. It says over here in the Mishnah, kebeitza mechuvenes taharin. When he then extracts the juice from these grapes, so then it still remains tahor, because we're talking about a kebeitza mechuvenes. So therefore, the question is, why did Rabbi Yochanan, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, a case of kabetza? Why did he say pachos machos of a kabetza? Answers the Gemara, hasam di ovad. There, he was talking about that he already was soichet. In that case, then we say pachos mikabetza, then it's going to be valid. But hocha lichatchila. And therefore, in the case of lichatchila, in the case of the Mishnah, which is that he already did it, there was Tmei Meis who came in contact with the grapes, he already was sochat in the past tense. Therefore, bidi eved, we say it's valid. And therefore, that's the case in the Mishnah. The reason why he taught in Rabbi Yochanan pachos machos mikabetza, he's talking about when you ask, can I go ahead and squeeze, can he squeeze this grape which is tamei? we're saying it's only going to be valid for yayin nesachin if it's a less than kabetza. Because gezerah dilma asili ma'abed yoisim mikabetza. The Chacham made a gezerah. Perhaps a person will then squeeze something that is a little bit more than a kabetza, whereby it'll render that first drop to become tameh, and therefore when it mixes with all the other juice, it'll also metameh the rest of the mashkin. Omale Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said back to him, Man sayis loch. Rabbi Yochanan Rabbach. Who's going to listen to you, Rav Acha bar Avia, and your Rebbe Rabbi Yochanan? That indeed over here we're talking about where the juice of the grapes does not become tamei because it's mifkad pokid. Says the Gemara, V'chi tuma shebahen leichin halcha. Where did the tuma of this liquid go? In other words, of course it became tamei. Not like you're saying in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Obviously, we hear from Rav Chisda that he learns differently than Rav Chisda, than Rabbi Yochanan. He learns that it's not a vart that there are pockets within the grapes themselves that are independent from the grape, like Rabbi Yochanan was saying. Rather, he holds mivla bloi. That means that it is absorbed into the grape. That means it's all one entity. And therefore, v'kiven the itmulei uchla itmulei mashkin. Once the oichel, namely the grape, is tamei, so the mashkin is also immediately and simultaneously tamei, because all one entity. Or malei va'atlo tizbo de mashkin mifkad pakidi. So then Rav Acha bar Avia turned to Rav Chisda and said, "You do not hold that the mashkin is called mifkad pakidi. It's not like these deposits that are within the grape themselves, making it independent from the grape. If not, v'hatnan, then you have a following difficulty. It says in the Mishnah, Tomei meishe sochad zeisim v'anovim mechuvenes kebeitza taharin. The Mishnah that we quoted before. If somebody is tomei meis, and therefore he comes in contact with the grape, whereby he makes the grape into a rishon l'tuma, it states over here in the Mishnah, he's able to then seichet it exactly though it's the size of a kabetza. And then the mashkin is taharin. Well, according to you, how is the mashkin taharin? If it's according to what I am saying, Rav Acha bar Avia said, then it's going to be understood why this juice is not going to become tamei. Because after all, it's a separate entity than the grape. And since the grape is not a full kabetza to metame the mashke, so therefore remains tahor. But according to you, that say that the juice is absorbed into the grape itself and is all one entity, whereby the grape that is tamei makes also the juice tamei. So the whole thing becomes tamei. Why over here do we say that the grape juice is taharin in the Mishnah? He says because we're talking about in this Mishnah where the grapes were not yet susceptible to becoming tamei. That's why the juice that comes out of it is going to be still tahor. So when do they become then susceptible for becoming tamei? Only once you seichet, once you squeeze those grapes. But when you squeeze the grapes, we're talking about when it's less than the shiur of a kabetza, and therefore they don't metamed the mashkin. That if you're not going to say like I'm saying, that the juice is viewed as bloy, as absorbed into the grape itself, and it's all one entity, then ha-detanya, that which is stated in the Mish Brisa. Now this is the Brisa that we said we brought this whole discussion for, because now we're bringing a proof from this Brisa that we quoted on Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. What is this Trumas Chametz compared to? This is what Rabbi Akiva says earlier. Le Trumas Tusin va'anovim. This is compared to the Truma of strawberries and grapes. Shenitma, that have become tamei, she'ein loy bo loy heter achil loy heter asokah, and therefore, just like trumas chametz does not have any benefit you cannot eat it and you cannot burn it, so too, when it comes to the truma of tusim and anovim, that became tamei, you cannot eat it, and also you cannot burn it, because after all, it's filled with water. So therefore you'll have no hana also. But according to what you're saying, though, that it's the juice is a separate entity than the grapes, then you should have a heter achila. And yet over here in the Brayser, Rabbi Akiva is saying it does not have a heter achila. According to what you're saying, you can just merely squeeze out the juice, pachas machas mikabetza, and therefore it'll have then a heter v'achila. So it must be rather, well, like I am saying, that it's mivlav loy, not nifgad pokide. Omar Rava answers on behalf of Rav Chisda, Gezeira dilma osi behulidei takala. There's a gezeira. It's true, it's not tamei, but they made a gezeira the chachamim because they were concerned that you might come to a takala. You might come to then eat such grapes. So therefore, they rendered it to be osir. Omar le Abaye questions Rava, umay chashinan letakala. Are we concerned about making a takala? A person might come to eat such grapes. It states in the Brayse, madlikin bepas v'shemen shel truma shenitmes. You're allowed to use pas and shemen for your fire. In other words, to get hana by using it for your fuel. And therefore, we see there's not a problem that you might come to then use the shemen and eat it. After all, shemen doesn't get consumed right away. It's a lot of shemen. It takes time. You use a little bit of shemen at a time. So over the course of time, we're still not concerned about a takala, and so forth. Therefore, you are able to then use pas and shemen. Why not? If you're, according to what you're saying, there's a takala, why is there no takala? Elamai, there's not such a thing as like a takala over here. There's no gezerah. Amalei. Rav responds back to Abaye, pas zorik le beina eitzim. First of all, the pas, the reason why you can use that for your fuel is because you throw it between the eitzim, whereby it becomes inedible, something that a person would be disgusted to use. Shemen shel truma rami le beklimos, whereas the oil of the truma is going to be thrown, is going to be put into a vessel that is disgusting. Again, rendering it in a way that person will not want to then consume it afterwards. So there's not going to be a takala in these cases. Masha enkim, we were discussing before, the grapes, there would be a takala. The Gemara brings back the previous statement, Gufa, madlikin bepas v'shemen shel truma shenitmes. When you have pas and shemen that was truma that became tameh, you can use it for your fire. Obaye omar mishmei dechizkiya v'rov amar debei Rabbi Yitzchok bar Marta Rav Huna, loy shanu elapas, aval chite loy. This is talking about pas. As you said before, when you put the pas and throw it between the firewood, that's going to render it something that's not going to be edible, something not going to want to eat from it. It's going to be disgusting. However, when it comes to chitim, then indeed we'd be concerned that a person, yes, may indeed come to eat it, and therefore there be a takala. Shema yavo behen lidei takala. Rabbi Yochanan ma afilu chite. Rabbi Yochanan argues that even chitim, even kernels of wheat, we are also not concerned about making a takal. That person might come to eat it. Because, v'amai, asking him why? Because why asking him why? Why not say there's also a potential problem of Easter over here if you go ahead and use the kernels of the wheat for your fire? Because they don't become disgusting like bread does. Kidom Rav Ashi, when Daf Lamed Daled Amar Aleph at the top, Bishlikoso umisoso. He says that you cook, we're talking about cooking the kernel of wheat very well, and then throwing it inside the fire, making it coming disgusting, whereby a person will come to eat it. And that's what Rav Ashi said. So then Hochanami, over here too, in our scenario, when it comes to these kernels that are truma, temeya, will also then allow you to throw it into the fire after having cooked it very well. Hochanami v'shlikoso umisoso. V'hecha idmar de Rav Ashi. Where did Rav Ashi make this original statement that indeed we can cook something very well and then make it disgusting? In what context did he say that? Aho, dom Rabbi Yafin bar Rabbi Abo am Rabbi Yitzchok. Abba Shaul Gabel Shel Beis Rabbi Haya. Abba Shaul, he was the one who needed in the house of Rebbe. By way Agav, you see that Abba Shaul, a great sage, he was not beneath his dignity to be somebody who was the one who was the Gabel in the house of Rebbe. Rebbe was the Nasi, Rebbe was very wealthy. And Abba Shaul, he made his parnasa apparently by kneading dough in the house of Rebbe. Al Koponim, it says, "V'hayu mechamin lo yichamin bechitin shel truma tmeya lo lush bohen isa betaro." They would use the hot water that was heated up. It was fueled by the kernels of wheat of truma tmeya, and they would then take that, and he would knead his dough from such hot water that was heated up from such kernels of wheat that was truma tmeya. And Rabbi was careful to eat al taras hakodesh. In other words, over here, once he used the kernels of wheat for fuel, he then took it out as mevatel, its status from oichel. No longer could it become something that's going to mitame. So therefore, it wasn't an issue of tuma, and he was able to use it. But ask the Gemara, amai, how can he do so? What about a potential takala? Nechush dilma asi behu lidei takala. Maybe a person will come to eat such kernels. On that, Rav Ashi responded, Rav Ashi, bishlikasa umisasa. We're talking about where he cooked the kernels very well, and then he threw it into the fire, whereby it was disgusting, whereby a person will not come to eat it.